How's everybody doing tonight? Shout out to my man before the billions. Thanks for joining me. Give me one in the chat if you can hear me. I'm trying to get used to this new restream, so I uploaded my slides. I don't know where they went. So PBO's struggling. Let's give me a second. We're gonna make this happen. I just did it. Where was that? I think that was here. Presentation. There we go. Whew. Always something new. You know how we do it. Give me one in the chat. Give me any tech or cybersecurity questions. Appreciate you, Sean. Uh, so we're gonna talk about a server assessment. Look at a few things. Everybody know I'm a NIST guy, so as an auditor, how would you do a kind of server assessment at a high level? Talk about a few things you would need to do to make that happen. Basically, appreciate you. For you, I don't know. Most people know me. Professional Black Ops. I've been in IT for 35 plus years. I've been in cybersecurity for about 15. I got a bachelor's of computer science. I started off as a programmer, doing really COBOL mainframe stuff. That's my first internship. Then I did Java for about 5 or 6 years at DoD as a consultant, specializing in data warehousing. Shout out to before the billions, the data engineer, data warehousing was pre that. So I did that for about 4 or 5 years. I've been everything from a DBA, system analyst, web admin, application admin. Did a lot of Apache Tomcat and Java in my lifetime. Switched over to cybersecurity when I was at DoD. They did NIST 800-53 at DoD. That's kind of was my introduction into cybersecurity. Then after that, I did GRC, governance risk and analysis, helping federal agencies and private companies set up their security program to do government work. Specifically, once again, 800-53 and IRS work. IRS Pub 1075 sits on top of 800-53. So that's my 2-minute elevator speech for those of y'all don't know. But once again, if you got any tech questions or cybersecurity questions, just put them in the chat. And I usually drop the link if you want to come up probably like halfway through the show. It'll be short. Like I said, shout out to the kids. They don't want me to talk for 3 hours. Nah, I've been trying to cut it down. I've been consistently around an hour. But once again, we're going to chop it up. So let's get going. That's the 20 families of NIST 800-53. So I think we're on really what we're going to talk about is configuration management, right? How do you get an image? How do you make sure all of your servers are set up with, we call it the gold image, right? Just the images you create, just the images you build all your servers on. Then from a GRC perspective, SBOM, what's your software bills of material in this image? Shout out to AWS, they went down. Is there a log4j that you had in there? Is a certain Apache version that's in your image? So you need to be able to figure out what's in that images in case you need to go do some, we call it post-mortem work. If something goes down, why did it go down? Was it the wrong version? Do we need to upgrade something in that image? But how do you track that image, know what's in that image, and once again, have that in your security program? A lot of times, too, if you get hacked by a bigger company and you report it to the IRS or HIPAA or HITRUST, they might want to get a copy of that image, right? So you got to say, this was this image inside this environment from this time frame to that time frame. Most people can't do that, by the way. Just gonna tell you, that sounds cool. Most people can't do that, right? So once again, this is a slide I've been rolling around. This is really third-party software. Part of that software is what's in your image and you put your software on. Once again, 2.41 trillion due to cybersecurity failures, data breach, or if your image is wrong, those would be operational failures, right? Legacy systems and unsuccessful deployment. But once again, part of that is operational failures, is what's in your image and what you put in your software on top of. So if you look there, it's this is from the NIST 800-53 documentation. That's CM6 configuration management, establishing document configuration settings for components within inside the system that reflects the most restricted mode consistent with your operational requirements. That restricted mode is usually least privilege. Who can get to what? You don't want to let people just put anything inside the image, right? So really, you want to whitelist what can go inside of an image. What has your company did a risk assessment on that you said is good to go with inside your organization? Implement the configuration settings. So we're going to talk about where do you get those configuration settings from? That's not okay. Where do we get those from? Identify, document, improve any deviation from established configuration settings. So a lot of times you can say, this is my goal setting, but your development team or certain business division has some software where you have to cut off some of your secure settings. It couldn't use encryption at 256. It could only use it at 128 because some Java app couldn't function at that higher. So once again, what's your approval for that deviation? Monitor control changes to the configuration settings in accordance with your organizational policies. You always got to have policies, procedures for things. It's a lot easier. Then two is implementation of your secure configuration settings. Those are a couple right there. On my next slide, we go over some of the common configuration settings. The United States government configuration baseline setting. My favorite one is Security Technical Implementation Guidelines, the STIGs. Most people know that's how I rock. I'm an old guy. So the STIGs, super heavy, super. We'll look at some of those. A lot of checks. We're going to look at the Windows 2022 server checks. I want to say it's 278 checks that goes into that image. Right? You're not going to be able to cut them all on. So let's be honest. So what can you leave off? Once again, if you can't cut it on, what's your standard deviation? You can document why you're still secure. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And here's some of the most common security configuration. Once again, the United States government configuration baseline. If you Google that, it'll show you the checks. I don't think a lot of people use that. I was working for a smaller company. That one actually came up. Usually I'm stigging it. Security Technical Implementation Guidelines. Those are usually from DoD. Those are the DoD hardening for a particular technology or infrastructure. Schisms is the IRS. I do a lot of IRS work, so safeguard baseline. So once again, they have a Windows 2022 image, or these are the settings they want you to set on there to make sure that implementation is secure. Most people seems to use the business-friendly CIS checks, Center for Internet Securities. They have a, I say okay. Not a big fan, but I know why a lot of people use it. It's something to ease into. They're pretty light. Then the other we're gonna look at it. You go. Everybody know I'm an AWS guy. You can go to AWS Marketplace and buy a STIG image for Windows. We're gonna actually go out to the marketplace and just kind of look at what that look like. I think it was, if you buy it medium, I think it was 6 cents an hour. If you use that particular image from the CIS benchmark, but if you pay up an hour, I think you could save like 10%, if you prepay for those hours. So there's a lot of different ways to save money in there. Once again, if you got any questions, cybersecurity or tech, put them in there. So let's kind of go through. Once again, the NIST family, we were talking about there, the baseline configuration settings and the management. Once again, establish and maintain approved hardened server image as configuration baseline. You see the NIST controls over there, CM2, CM6, and CM9. Uh-oh. Facts. That is a true standard to where the systems. It's a heavy lift. That is correct. I usually say incorrect most of the time. You are correct. A lot of times, if you stick it to the fullest, you will have a brick and it won't work. So that's the challenges of the STIG. That is a correct statement. Information system component inventory. You can auto discover it. We were talking about that inside Discord for Study GRC. There's an open source product called Spiceworks. it would actually discover servers and software running inside your network. So that was CM 8-3. Information system backup and system recovery and reconstitution. Part of having that image is if your main site goes down, you can just spin it up into another region. Then, of course, you could get your site and your servers up and running. If you run in Terraform or CloudFormation, you can just run those stacks into to build your environment up. Probably, and depending on how big it is, and most model companies are environment, like you can probably build that in 15 minutes or less, right? Or you can automate it, right? So that's one thing we were talking about AWS. If their main region went down, you should automatically fail over to another region, like East or West. And so people were trying to figure out why more big companies wasn't failing over. Incident handling and incident response must preserve evidence finding this image for a forensic analysis recovery. So part of that too is if you have a hack and the bad guys got on that server, what is your gold image to match that? Did they change stuff? That's how they break in, or did you have some version of a software that had a vulnerability in it? So once again, you got to preserve evidence of the one that got hacked. Then a lot of times they want to take your gold image and do a diff. Did somebody get in your infrastructure and change it? That's why they broke in. So a lot of times that's why you have your gold. Then you're actually image that was hacked. Or did somebody push out a unapproved update to your image? So that's one thing you want to make sure you have that process down. We'll talk a little bit about that. Information management and retention. Address secure retention and disposal of captured evidence in the system state. So if you have your image, how do you secure it to make sure nobody gets to it? You want the bad guy to get your image and kind of figure out what version you have. So a lot of times we're going to look at AWS. They got some have the EC2 builder. A lot of times we just put a folder up on S3 and just have a special bucket for the admin, the forensic people, and high-level people that can look at that image and update that image. Usually on there, we put compliance inside S3. So that means you can't delete it for 7 years or 10 years, right? So we want to make sure nobody ever, once again, deletes, gets to it, or change it. Because from a GRC and auditing perspective, once you call it gold in the environment, all right, you should only change it when you have approved version. That'll be your version 23, 28. But if that's the current version rolling, right, that's locked. And once again, you can use it to spin it up in another region or something. If your main region goes down for DR, but once again, nobody should be able to change or make updates to that particular version. Baseline, maintain a server image. Organization must maintain a secure, approved, once again, gold image. That's an old term. I was using that in like 2005 for each server type, web server, database, app class. So each, once again, server type, like you have a web server. In the old days, I had an Apache gold image. So this is what we used to run Apache on it. It had to get your web server, and this was the image we were running on web server. Then we have an application server that was Tomcat, that was our Java. So we would have a gold image of that. And once again, your database. Back then we were running Oracle, so we would have a gold image of Oracle, right? So once again, if we got audited, we could say these were our images of our different subnets and levels inside our environment. Create a hardened baseline using DoD STIG, CIS benchmarks, CIS standards, like whatever you use. Once again, I use Schism, the IRS. There's a few. Or once again, you can use best of breed for your organization. Apply approved practice and configuration setting. This is the thing right here. Digitally sign and check some of your image to detect tampering. Store your metadata in your CMDB or your AWS config or Azure policy for traceability. Review, rebuild baseline periodically, quarterly, or upon major OS patch releases. Right, you're gonna have to update the image because you got patch Tuesday. There are gonna be security vulnerabilities, so you can't say this is one it for the whole year, right? So we usually at least try to have one. You at least gonna have one every 2 months, right? So a lot of times, patch studios they come out. There's no big security patches in there. We want to test it for a couple weeks. So a lot of times we try to have one every 6 months because the testing back then was horrendous. Now there's a lot of automated tests you can do. You can make it a little easier. A lot of people running Jenkins and other type automated test banks that you can run. So you might want to push out a little quicker, but you got to remember the infrastructure shouldn't be changing that much. All right. So technical example from AWS. We're going to talk a little bit about Amazon EC2 image builder. Enforce immutability by versioning your AMI, right? That's your image inside AWS. And store the AMIDs inside AWS config or service catalog to enforce deployment consistency. Right. So once I get my AI, you can use a service catalog. So if your development team wants to spin up different type of images and different sizes, you can give them that service catalog so they won't be just download anything they want. They running up your bill. You can say this is the size and this is what you can do. And once again, you'll have a development OU and you can lock that down saying these are the EC2s, which is basically Windows or Linux you can run. This is the web server and app server you can run. This is the size of database you can spin up, right? You want to put some control around your developers, so you won't be getting these huge, surprising AWS bills. So, and two is a lot of times you want to tag those so their managers can see what their spend is for the week or 2 weeks or a month, so they won't be once again getting surprised by these huge AWS bills. So, I'm trying to lab a lot, so I got an AWS budget. If my budget goes over $60, PBO gets an email, right? So once again, you want to be surprised. Shout out to my man. He had the big AWS bill. Somebody kind of hacked him, so he got surprised. So I try to look at my AWS bill every day. Shout out to me. I did have a rogue Aurora MySQL version that I forgot to shut down. Relational database on AWS kind of expensive. I was like, why my bill $55 already for 2 weeks? I was like, oh my God. I forgot to shut down an Aurora relational database. Like I said, they get charged or not. So let's keep going. Storage, secure retention for your incident response. When an incident response occurs, once again, ransomware intrusion compromise, the organization must preserve the affected image in a way that supports forensic analysis, evidence preservation, and restoration and rebuild. Recommended approach, take a snapshot or this image immediately after isolating the image. You can use AWS create snapshot. Usually I have a playbook. So if there's an image, usually you can put the image ID inside the playbook. It's a thing called System Manager with documents. So it actually, once again, make a copy of the image, put it in its own subnet so it can't, get to other things of the organization. Make sure the security groups locks everything down. Then once again, too, you gotta save the memory, save the open files. There's a lot of pre-forensic stuff you want to do before the forensic people get in there. And once again, that'll be in your playbook. On Azure and manage the snapshot. Secure stores securely offline or in a restricted encrypted S3 vault. Use encryption keys. Use the S3 object lock with Glacier lock for immutability. So once again, that image, you want to save it somewhere. Once again, I usually use a compliance lock on some of that stuff so you can save it for 7 years and nobody can change it. So once again, AWS has a ton of features. Restrict access. We were just talking about that. Forensic to the incident response team. Roles only. You can use leg formation or your IAM policy for least restriction. Even a lot of times I don't want to have a right to that. Right? I just want to have read. I kind of put it on there. Shout out to what's going on. So once again, just kind of talking about server images and what you need to do for saving it, making a gold copy of it, and if one of your images get hacked, what's kind of your playbook going to look like? Document the chain of custody, date, time, and response analyst has the verification per IRA. Retain according to your evidence retention schedule, often 1 to 3 years post incident. A lot of times the IRS wants stuff saved for 7 years, so I'm just kind of in that mode. And even a lot of times, check your state. I worked for the state of Indiana, they wanted you to keep stuff for 15 years and 10 years, right? Because you get FOIA, you can get like a FOIA request for some of that. So a lot of times they want to keep it for 10. So you have to work with your legal staff and your GRC staff to figure out what those requirements are. Yes and no. It depends on the level of classification of your data. I did a lot of IRS work. The number one question is that your personal machine or are they giving you an agency machine? Usually when I do IRS work, you cannot work on your personal machine. They're going to give you an agency machine or a corporate machine. So even if you're a corporation working for the IRS, usually they want to, at least you got to be working on a corporate machine. Once again, most people don't let you work on your personal machine. So the first question for that is, what's your classification of data? Once again, I do a lot of IRS work. And two is, are you using your personal machine or a corporate machine or agency machine? An agency is, once again, I work for the Department of Revenue of Indiana. They would give me an agency machine. I work for a small consulting company. The corporate machine, if they gave me a machine to work on, to be honest, I would never use my personal machine and work on a government contract. Now, once again, what part of the government? Are you state government? Are you fed government? I do federal work. I would not do that on my machine. The risk and liability, but I'm old and I'm jaded. That's an easy way to get blamed. So if I'm working on a corporate machine or an agency machine, they're responsible for my security, not me. Right? I work on it. They need to make sure my machine's secure. They need to patch it. They need to make sure I got least privileges. They need to whitelist the software. So for me, I usually work on a least corporate machine, or a lot of times I get agency. Once again, I do a lot of federal work. The agency I'm working for, even as a consultant, they give me a machine. So I don't think the Department of Defense will let you work on your personal machine. I'm surprised the Department of Defense. I worked for them for 10 years. They never let. They would be chewing us out. So, yes, defenders adequate. If you work for defense, I would actually go out. We'll look at. I would go out to the STIGs for Windows 11 and make sure my machine is stigged up at a DoD level. Because you work on a machine, you don't even know if it's at the right security that DoD wants. I worked at DoD Finance for 11 years. So that would be my question is, I'm surprised they would let you do that. The number two is, I would make sure my machine would be stigged. And shout out to Chris Whitlock. I would actually work on VDI inside AWS, where I would go into the sandbox and the VDI is responsible for the security and not my personal machine. Once again, I'm Jade. If you want to come up and talk a little bit about more, just put some more questions on there. I would get a corporate machine from my company. But once again, I'm jaded, and I think everybody's trying to set me up. Recommended architecture for cloud example. Once again, incident response and image workflow. So you got your compromised EC2, which is basically your OS, Windows, or Linux. I love Amazon too. Encrypt the snapshot. Take a copy of that to your forensic account. You're going to have a cross account and sue my AI role. Automate the hashing to make sure, once again, you hash it and nothing changes or anything gets added to it. You can make sure this was the original image you got. Glacier Vault, we talked about that. That's the S3. Make it versioning, make a compliance check, make sure nobody can delete it. Somebody had to change it. They need to make a new version of it. Once again, the controls enforced. We always talk about that in this 800-53. No problem. If you want to talk about a little bit more, we could do that. I'll put in the link. I would actually use AWS VDI. And once again, they do the security level of DoD. And that's really, I think, the only way you can use a personal machine. So, once again, I don't know what part. DoD is a big part. They have DoD, DLL, logistics. I worked for DFI's finance. Then they had a regular DoD. DoD is a huge organization. Once again, I did a lot of IRS work too on DoD. So Those are super similar about how they worked. Once again, I probably would get a corporate machine and make them responsible for the type of work. If they wanted me to use my machine, I probably would go to a VDI inside AWS, which is like a cube. It's really like one of those Google laptops. The cube just gives you power to get to the AWS virtual desktop. Then the virtual desktop handles all the security getting into DoD. Documented audit evidence. That's us. We GRC. So what kind of evidence will we be looking for and talking about? Configuration management baseline records, version list of approved image, build script, patch levels inside, right? So when you build your server is just a bunch of software, right? You got your Windows 2022. That's kind of what's out there. 2025 is out there, but most people run in 2022. But what's the settings for that? And we're going to look at a few settings coming up to make sure that's DoD specific. Shout out to my man, user Simon 50011. We might look at the STIG checks for a home laptop or a home PC, laptop, desktop, and see what that will look like from a DoD perspective. We might give him a bonus for showing up today. Shout out to me. Shout out to me. So the best practices, we kind of went through them. Baseline maintenance, maintain your STIG or CIS hardened gold image with version control, right? A lot of people talk about SBOM, software bills of material. What's in that image, right? We know Kaseya's had a big log for J-Hack. Everybody was scrambling because they didn't know it was inside their software because they were buying software that was bundled inside. A lot of people were like, I didn't know I was running log4j. So really, what's in your image? That's a big deal now, right? So you buy software, but what is your software created of? A lot of times you can have a vulnerability and not know it because you don't know what your software is built of. But shout out to software as a service. Now that's kind of in the cloud, you call it. So you make sure your vendors in that. But I kind of want to know what my vendors software is using so I can be on top of it because I'm responsible for that, especially if GRC. Let's see, storage security, encrypt and restrict access to image repositories. We want to sign an image with the hash to make sure nobody's messing with it. Incident preservation, snapshots affected by server hash and store immutability for the forensic guys. So when the forensic guys show up to do an assessment, to dig in, the DFARS to dig in, those guys are charging $250 an hour. You can't have them guys wait. A lot of times, people want to figure out what happened too as part of that incident. Once again, I do work for DOD, the IRS. Once you figure it out that it looks funny, you might not figure out for hack, but if you think something funny, the IRS and DOD want to know within 24 hours. So they can see, okay, we need to be monitoring to see if we got something bigger. Because 2 of 10 states caught with the same problem, right? That could be a nation state attack. So they want to let you know within 24 hours. So part of your documentation from your incident response from a GRC perspective is, we saw this at 5 a.m., aka AWS. 12 hours later, we figured out it wasn't a hack. It was a configuration change. But the IRS or HIPAA and High Trust or the DOD, they want to know that ASAP. So you got to figure out when the clock's ticking, because if you start missing time, your fine's going to get bigger and bigger, right? So you want to make sure when it started, what time, probably every 4 or 5 hours, you could just, we're still working on it. We're still checking. This is our preliminary investigation, right? A lot of times my boss said is, you want to call me, you want to make sure you call me before I call you, right? So even if it's just email, if people got to track you down, they're not happy, right? So even if you just hit them up 4 hours, this is our preliminary. This is what we found. We don't believe it's an attack. This is our current setting, right? And a lot of times you're outsourcing that to your third party. So you got to make sure your third party is reporting to you so you can report to your federal agency, right, to stay on top of it. And I think a lot of times that falls to GRC. Snapshot affected servers, once again, hash, recovery tested, periodically validate the image, restoration, and DR. So you got your gold image. If your main site goes down and it spins up in another region, especially AWS and Azure, it should automatically spin that up You should have a DNS fails over to a different region. And it's in that region, once your traffic start hitting your application load balancer, your EC2s or your Windows should start spinning up with the more traffic you have. Your database should once again read unhealthy. You have they call it a read replica. It should spin up to the primary database. Your DNS should automatically change to start sending traffic to it. Depending on your RTO, return to operations, RPO, report of operations, how much data can you lose and how quick do you want to come up? You can come up quick. It might cost you some money though, right? So we always tell them we can come up, but how much money you want to spend? But once again, you need to test that annual at least. NIST wants you to at least check that annually. I worked with a company. They had we used to bid on work for other states years ago. The states a lot of times say we want to come up within 5 minutes. We want to come up within 4 hours, right? So you need to ask your clients what are those expectations. Then you need to charge them accordingly, right? We just talked about the automation. You can use the EC2 or the Azure Image Gallery or Packer Pipeline. There's a couple ways to do images. A lot of times people use Terraform for their images to kind of do that automation testing too. So there's different products that once again you can do that type of testing. This is the Stigs. That's for, you see it right there, for Windows Server 2022. I'm a Linux guy, but a lot of people running Windows. So why do I like the Stigs? You got 31 high checks, 232 medium checks, and 12 Cat 3 low checks, right? So that's 63. So you got about 275 checks, right, that you're going to do on your Windows server. You as a GRC, but shout out to Jim. Some of those might break your system, but those are the checks you need to check to see if your system can do it. You can cut them on, and to me, you be at a level of security that you above the normal company, right? But once again, like Jim just said, I'm gonna highlight that there, and he's 100% true. I love Stigs. They break everything to where the system's totally secure. Yep. We used to say that you're gonna be so secure it won't work, but the part of that I think is the big boy is, like I said, locking it down, figuring out what you can secure and figure out what you need to lock down. Once again on that security. I dropped the link if anybody want to come up. Now for my man, I probably bring up the I don't know when. Let me share. I can see if I can share the Windows workstation laptop checks for that. Since my man's working for DoD, we want to make sure he don't get in trouble. He's at the proper security level he needs to be at. So let's see if it'll let me share. This is the EC2 image builder. If you want to build your own image, AMI is the image is going to create once you build it. Then that's your EC2 is your Windows server that's going to spin up inside your auto scaling group and your VPC. It's going to use that image that you built right there. Once again, it could be, we can have a Windows Server 2022. We got all the Stigs on there. We got our Apache on there. We're ready to do some web content, and we super secure. We're so secure, like Jim said, it won't come up now. That's playing. Good evening. Glad you could join us. Shout out to the Equalizer. What's your Linux server? We'll look at a few of those real quick. Equalizer. We're gonna look at a few of those. Hopefully, I'm having a few problems machine. We'll look at some of those checks. Actually, let me know too. I have a video on Stig checks for Windows, Docker, Oracle, SQL Server. So yeah, I got a Stig playlist. But we'll definitely look at something. Once again, if you want to build your own AWS, you can specify your pipeline details, customize your image, define your workflow. A lot of times you want it to get approved by somebody. You want to go into testing, and once testing passed, you want to approve that image, right? You want to automate that. Configure, build your infrastructure, VPCs, your subnet. So what's that going to look to? When you spin up your image, you spin it up in a subnet. That could be the web server, a subnet, the application server subnet, or the database, standard 3-tier architecture. So where are you spinning up at? Define an image distribution. Once again, it's web server, app server, each one of those subnets has a specific functionality, least privilege. Once again, that's where the web server going to go. So we're going to make sure the ports are coming from the web server. The ports leaving are going to be specifically going for an app server or going for some admin stuff that are DBAs or web admins or sysadmins. But we're going to lock down a port source super tight. So once again, where do you define that distribution to go to? Once again, shout out to AWS. They have their managed STIG image out there already. So I just pull that page down. STIGs are configuration for hardening standards created by the Defense Information System Agency, DISA. That handles the security for DoD. And at the back, it talks about the compliance level, Cat 1 or Cat 2 or 3. If you couldn't harden something as a Cat 1, that would be bad because I don't think your image could go out with open Cat 1s. But those are the things when you cut out certain hardening things. And we're going to look at those. They have categories on there and what that would look like. The thing I would do is, if you look out there, this is Amazon Marketplace. This is CIS, one of the big agencies, nonprofit agencies. They have their own hardening out there that you can buy, and I would just get it from the marketplace, right? Instead of you hardening and trying to make it fit, they could do a lot of work for you, right? And I think, depending on how big your organization, though, that is pretty cheap, unless you were like running like 1,000 VMs spinning up or something. But if you're just a small company running 2 or 3 VMs at night, most of the times during work hours, you're not really spinning up a 3 or 4. I probably would just buy that image off the marketplace. So let's see if I can share, which is not letting me do. Let's see if I could share. Okay, that's my man 5011 and my man Equalizer said, what's the parameters? We're going to look at some Windows parameters and we'll look at some Linux parameters because that's what my man asked for. So let's look at the Stick Viewer. If you look at the top, if you do stigviewer.com, this is pretty accurate. I compared it. A lot of times the Stig Viewer and stuff you get from DoD, it's kind of a heavy lift. So if I'm just doing something quick and dirty and just want to check a few things, or some people ask me questions. So this is once again the 2022 Windows Server. It has 31 high checks, 232 medium checks, and 12 low checks. Right. So some of the high checks: the Windows Server 2020 debug program user rights must only be assigned to administration group. So this shows you the description. Inappropriately granted user rights can provide system administration and other level high capabilities. Good thing about, if you click on that, you can drill down into it and it'll actually show you the settings. Let's hope this works because it was airing. Okay, we making progress today. So again, it shows you the finding if you can't fix it. It shows you the high. And let's look at the check, right? You run this, you go to this computer setting. Administrator for core installation, that's what you're going to run. How to fix it, you go to this inside your regedit. Configure policy value, Windows setting, security setting, localhost, debug programs to include only the accounts to the groups of administrator. Right. So I like this because I can give it to junior people because you don't have to guess. So the thing I need you to tell me is it set to this or something else? Don't fix it. Just tell me the settings and we can go through and say, these are our findings. These are things we need to fix. This is how much it's going to cost us, right? Then we can kind of build up a program list to figure out what we need to change. Because if we change something, we need to test it. That's one of the big things people forget. We got to test it, right? So that's what we're going to do. So once again, let's look at one more inside the Windows 2022 check. Let's look at another Cat 1. Let's find. Oh, yeah, NTLM. So let's read it real quick. We're going to scan to it. Authentication level must be configured to send NTLM version 2 response only and refuse LM and NTLM because both of those have been compromised. The Kerberos version 5 authentication protocol default authentication of users who are logging into a domain account. NTLM, which is less secure, is retained in later versions of Windows for compatibility with clients. So once again, we got to get it out of the default NTLM and get it to that version 2, right? So once again, the fix for that, it tells you where to go inside the you can go to Regedit. You can do the OU group. A lot of times I fix it in the OU and I just drop the servers in the OU so they can all have the same settings, right? So there's a couple ways to do it. Or you can do the local settings, which I don't recommend. That's his local policy. A lot of times I set it in the OU, then drop that server inside the OU so they all can be alike. So that's it. Let's go real quick. I dropped the link if anybody want to come up. So let's check for my man. Let's look at a couple Linux settings real quick. Where I go? I went to the 853. So once again, here's all the technologies they have in there. I think they have Red Hat in there. Let's see if they got the Amazon Linux is a fork of Red Hat. So usually I just use the Red Hat checks and they work pretty good. Let's see if I can find the Red Hat checks. Doing stuff on the fly. We're doing stuff on the fly. There it is. Red Hat. So let's go. Red Hat Linux 9. Are you looking for a specific flavor of Linux? Once again, I use Red Hat or Ubuntu because they have Linux checks. So once again, we're going to look at the first one. So my man was talking about Linux check. So this is for Red Hat, which works with Amazon Linux 2. This is how you would check it. You do your LS, and this is what you need to look for. But once again, if you need to fix it, it shows you how to fix it. You run your sudo for your crypto policies, and once you set a FIPS on, it's going to cut a lot of your stuff off in that work, but that's how you would fix it. And once again, this is the Red Hat Linux 2. We're talking about a high category. That means we got to have it set. Once again, that FIPS mode, meaning this has been approved by the government, and once you cut it on, any encryption on there is not approved by the government gets cut off. And a lot of things start to break when you do that, but shout out to that. But once again, we can kind of document it and say why we cutting on FIPS. Once again, once you cut on that FIPS mode enable, shout out to my man. He told you're going to break a lot of stuff. So shout out to Larry, one of the top PMs on YouTube. Trying to get him to start a channel, but I know he's busy. Thanks for joining me. Let's see. My man was talking about that. Yeah. So when you cut that sudo check on for that FIPS, it's going to break a lot of stuff, right? So let's do one more quick thing. Once again, I dropped the link if anybody wants to come up. I'll drop it again. Let's look at my man. He was talking about working from home from his DOD machine. PBL wasn't feeling that, but let's see if we can look at the Windows checks for that real quick. There's the viewer. Let's go to Sticks. Let's go Windows 11. PBO giving out some great information tonight, man. Make sure he get his machine locked down. Oh my God. Let's do Windows 11. Yep. So we do Windows 11. The cool thing is this came out. It's just been updated 2025, month 15. So we know it's current. Shout out to the Stigs. They always pretty much up to date. They probably do at least an update every year. If you're using something that's being updated, but shout out to that. Let's see if it gets there. Like I said, it was airing a little bit. If anybody has any more questions, drop them in the box. We're going to check out this for my man, Sama 5111. So let's look at a few of those. So this is the Windows check. So if you're working theoretically from home, these are the settings you would do on your machine. So The debug user must only be assigned to an administration group. Create a token object user must not be assigned to certain groups. The act as part of the operating system must not be assigned to any groups. Landman, we were looking at that. By default, you get NTLM on your PC. You want to make sure you're using NTLM version 2. So let's see how many checks my man needs to have on his workstation. Oh, this is 213 checks, medium, 28 high, and 17 low. So I'll drop this in the chat for my man 5011 so he can have me. You go check him out. Man, make sure he's in compliance. We don't want my man to get in trouble. PBO out there looking, taking care of people. Taking care of people. So that's the two. If you back up, it shows you the other things. But from working from home from DoD, I would recommend you do these settings. And I think part of that setting would be having your defender cut on. Let's see if that defender check is in there. Let's see if defender's in there. I believe I saw it. I usually go through these checks like every other year so I can be familiar, but I haven't. Yep, there it is. It's 3 times. The Microsoft Defender squash screen for Explorer must be enabled. Let's see. It just had that one issue, but probably if you go a little deeper with that, like again, you probably definitely need to have it cut on your machine. So. Oh, and I was going to look at one more other thing real quick before we call it a night. Like I said, I am. Okay, let's see. So here, let's make that a little bigger. We're talking about the marketplace. That's AWS where you can buy stuff. So you can see Amazon image. We were talking about that. So if you go from the CIS, which is a very reputable organization, it shows you the overview. CIS hard and stick image for Windows Server 2022, pre-configured by the Center of Internet Security for Elastic Compute. Is pre-configured security hardening that aligns with robust security recommendation. The CIS benchmarks make it easier for organizations to meet regulatory requirements. I'm gonna skip around. Compliance readiness, you see it right there. That's what we're trying. You get your PCI-DS. Shout out to my man Hami. FedRAMP, DoD, FISMA, and we know we're a NIST organization. So this image helps you for your readiness for your auditing for that, right? So let's keep going. Your features, you purchase, you can finance it. Pricing, here's some of the pricing. If you do a 2-3 medium, it's only 2 cents an hour. If you're a small organization, that's what's recommended. So you just talking about 2 cents an hour and 2,000 of an cent. So I would just call it 2 cents an hour. We round down. so the cost is reasonable. If you pay up for a 365-day contract, you get 6%. You can get custom pricing if you want to request it. If I was a nonprofit or small company, I would ask for some custom pricing option. A lot of times, we talked about this in user licensing. You need to check that. Once again, AWS does that. So you can look at their end user license to make sure from a security and third-party assessment, it's in line with your corporation. And once again, the usage information. 3011. We were talking about version numbers, right, of your images and keep tracking those so you know what's inside your gold image. Right. The vendor support we talked about in another video. That's AWS making sure the CIS is doing what they can from a contractual support, how they help you. Then once again, since it's on AWS infrastructure, you can actually ping them if you're having a problem with your image, right? So they'll help you with that. They got some accolades, top 25 in compliance and auditing, CIS comparisons. Once Ubuntu's out there and CentOS is out there, so it's different OS. But once again, you can look at the marketplace and buy your image for 2 cents. I usually tell a lot of my smaller companies, even though they're money conscious, just pay the 2 cent. You ain't running. At most, you probably have a couple VMs up inside your org, and if you're selling it to the government, just charge them back for it, right? You can once again charge it up. So once again, that takes a lot of heavy lifting off of you, right? So once again, there's the CIS. Palo Alto has an image, I guess, for their firewalls. AWS has their Linux 2 AMI image. That's what I usually do when I spin up. Just use their Linux AMI image and just kind of run them through the SCAP or AWS config, and it'll tell me what those settings are, and tell me what's not set appropriately. Right. So once again, that level 1 image, 2 cent is you pay $495 for the whole year, right? You get that image. All right. So probably 1,000, probably a cover. You probably have a couple images up. If you got more than that, you need to be making a lot of money. So, but once again, different ways to do it, different ways to skin a cat. PBO just trying to give you a couple ways to do it. Once again, so I think that's all I had for tonight. Somebody asked me some server questions, so I just thought I'd bring them to the community and just talk about compliance and GRC out there. Once again, if you got any questions, technology or cybersecurity, just drop them in the chat. PBO tired today. He always tired, but once again, just wanted to do that. I think I answered everybody's questions in the chat. Shout out to my man GMR. He's correct. You gotta watch when you stick. Helping my man out a little bit. Once again, I'm a little perplexed. Because DoD usually doesn't let you use your personal machine. So but once again, I gave you the checks for that. I would lock them down, something similar to that. I appreciate it. Yep. I'm doing one Friday at noon. So definitely doing a lunch and learn. So I might not might. I probably talk about the AWS outage. A lot of people were talking about why they didn't fell over to a different region. RAC root cause of that. It looks like it was a DNS issue. They have their control plane. Their control plane, I don't think is it's high availability, but I don't think it's in multiple regions. So whatever that comes out, we talk a little bit about that. Let me know if you want me to talk about something specific. My lunch and learn is usually on Friday. We talk about third-party assessments. I get a lot of questions on third-party assessments, so I've been kind of going over third-party assessments. I appreciate that, Zabar Cole. Once again, I'm gonna hang out a little longer, see if anybody has any questions. Cybersecurity information systems. Once again, I've been in this game for a very long time, and people been asking me questions. So shout out to my man. Go check out my man. He probably out of here before the billions. He was doing some data engineering and different type of things on his channel. It's kind of unique. So I'm definitely over there bugging him some. Shout out to my man Study GRC with Chris and B Dubs. I'm usually over there bothering them. So I'm all over. So once again, drop any more questions. So just kind of talking about really images. How do you handle them? How do you assess them, right, when you're auditing them? Right? What are you looking for? Usually the gold image. How do you get it properly built? Right. So we look at the EC2 image builder. You can do it yourself. Or shout out to the screen. I would just buy it off the marketplace at 2 cents an hour. Right. So there's a couple ways to do it. I could definitely understand if you're trying to save money and you're a startup. A lot of people doing DoD work has a certain amount of money because doing federal work comes at a cost, right, of doing that type of work. Right? But part of that cost is you billing them because they got money, right? So there's a line there. So PBO gonna go get a little dinner. He need to be eating better. been a rough 2025 for me, but I can't complain. Shout out to my if you had to start over career, what would you do differently? I started so late. I like my career. The only thing I would do differently is I had my son so early and my mother was old, even though she wanted me The only thing I would do differently, I would have went to Silicon Valley and try to get the big money, get those $300,000 a year job, working with some of the top. Because I think after 4 or 5 years, I had the experience. I think I had a little imposter syndrome. The only thing I would do is go get the bag. For my journey, so a lot of people don't know, I got a bachelor's computer science. I programmed for 10 years and loved it. Back then, though, DBAs and cybersecurity people made more money than programming. That's the only reason I switched. Then that programming background, because once I got a senior level, I was spinning up Java, hooking it to an Oracle database, spinning it up inside VMware, spinning up inside AWS Cloud. So I got those other skills. So when I went to be a web admin, I was always doing that work because I had to test my apps. So I spin it up Apache and Java on my personal machine to be able to test it. Then I was connected to an Oracle database, right? So that helped me get all those skills. So the only thing I probably would do different is probably trying to go to big jobs. But when I came in the industry, right, I had a college degree, which is different now, right? Your college degree now costs you $110,000. I think I paid $600 for mine. So then when I got my master's degree, the company I work for a Fortune 500 insurance company. They paid for my master's degree. They were like, okay, once you start, you got to stay here 3 years. I'm like, it's gonna take me 3 years to get it. So I probably wouldn't change much. So once again, the only thing I would have done differently. The only thing I would change is shout out to Gabe and Struggle Security. I had a couple bad teams I managed that almost gave me an ulcer. That's why I didn't go into management. I might would have went and tried to be a VP or a senior or something. I'd have kept my path the same, but maybe just once again try to get in that senior leadership. Especially now, I got to know a lot of people looking for work. If I had that type of job, I could help people get a job easier, right? Like I could recommend people, but when you're a VP, you can hire people, right? Those are different things. So that's probably the only thing I would change in my career. Going after the bigger money, once again, the FANG type stuff, and maybe going to senior management. Shout out to Gabe. He told me I still should do it. I'm like, dude, I'm almost 60, but I might. So that's probably the only thing I would do. Let me know if that answered your question. I'm kind of rambling. Where was that? Oh, yeah. So, but once again, I thought what I did I just kind of really enjoy that path because in the old days when you moved up, it was kind of like apprenticeship. You had to be a developer before you become a system analyst. You had to be a system analyst before you became a DBA. You had to be a DBA before you became an infrastructure guy, right? Because as you go up the ladder, each one of those is your customer, right? I was a programmer, and when I went to system analyst or DBA, I knew what the programmer wanted because I was the programmer, right? I knew what I needed from my DBA. Then when I became a web admin, I was putting my program inside Apache, so I knew what I needed. I knew what I needed to set up when I did it, right? So that kind of cut a lot of those issues off, which I don't think is good or bad. But a lot of times now, you could just jump in and be a DBA. But if you never program, sometimes it's kind of figure out what does your customer need, right? But a lot of times too, I think that's kind of an old way of thinking too, right? So let me know, Equalize, if that answers your question. But no, I just really enjoy what I've done. But now too, I think you don't need a college degree a lot of times. You can go straight for the certification and get in the game. Yeah, okay, I can play. Get in the game. So it's different ways to get into it. In the older days, especially going to DOD, you had to have a degree. Man, they wanted you to have a degree. Now, let me back that up. I take that back. I trained a lot of military people that didn't have degrees, right? So, but as a consultant and a senior consultant, they definitely wanted you to have a degree. Now, I don't know if the return on investment for the degree, we can kind of talk about that. You could definitely do the search and kind of jump in. The only problem now is so many people are unemployed. You going against people with degrees, and a lot of times, if 300 people applying for remote jobs, they're gonna use the degree to cut the people out. Right? I was applying for a senior job. I don't have my CISSP. That's on my list. I'm getting a couple more AWS, and I got to get on that CISP. she said she saw my YouTube video, so I didn't technically have to have a CISP, but that's what they were using to cut off. But she put me in the pack, and I didn't have one because I think it was a senior job making 100 plus. Man, it was like 300 people already. You seen them when you go to Indeed or any of those job boards. It'd be on there for 6 hours. Shit, you got like 200 people apply. So they don't want to look at 200 resumes, so they cut it off. They use degrees to cut it off or certain certifications to cut off. So that's kind of on that. Oh, facts, and I definitely want to acknowledge that it's definitely a different world now. The problem is it's a different world, but it's the same. What do I mean by that? I think we're in a recession, which I came out when I first came out of school. So even though it's a different world, since so many people are looking, they're using degrees to cut it off and hire people, unless you know somebody. So that makes it the same. I'm a Gen Xer. I still work with a lot of baby boomers. They have degrees, so the people they hire, they want to have degrees. And it's getting kind of crazy. You look at an entry level, they want you to have 3 to 5 years for an entry level job because so many people are looking. Entry level shouldn't be 3 to 5 years. Maybe if you say 0 to 2, but you can't say 3 to 5 for entry, right? So since the job market's so depressed, it's pushing it back to a kind of an older time where you got to have credentials, you got to have contacts, and they're looking for, once again, certain degrees from certain schools, which is crazy, right? Because the boomers are still hiring. My man, I really love Phil, but can't seem to get in school via loan or grant. The little bit of time I got will help my classmates more than saw something familiar. I don't know where you at. I'm in the Midwest. I tell people the blueprint is community college. I used to teach at a community college. It's a lot cheaper than your regular 4-year college. You could do it at night. They have a lot of online programs. They WGU. I mean, because in your classes, you're getting your certifications. So I think that's the blueprint. Then a lot of times where you work at, all the jobs I worked at, even though once again they were mid-sized organization or big size, they pay for you to go to class. They pay for your education, right? You have to pay a couple years. So you depend on where you're at in Illinois. I'm in Indiana. I'm right next to you. So that's I think the blueprint. Depending on where you work, hopefully they got some tuition reimbursement. I get the WGU because a lot of times they take experience as part of your degree. So you can get a bachelor's degree in like 2 years, depending on your background, right? And two is there's a lot of online courses are good. I got to be careful with that because that's perfect. You go to school in the morning. You can either take a nap and go to class by 11, 12 and go back to bed. Go back to bed. So okay, Peoria. I've been there. I've been to Peoria before. I actually interviewed in Peoria for Cummings. I think Cummings headquarters used to be in Peoria. So that's kind of what I would look at. Community college, see if your work pays for it. I'm always taking Udemy classes for $9 to $10. They have some good classes and they have a lot of sucky stuff out there, but I got a learning field with Udemy classes I'm taking right. I'm enamored with data engineering. I should do that. So I've been doing some AWS Glue, Shift, more for data engineering because the AI needs something to train, right? So you got to move the data to help train the AI. So that's kind of what I've been kind of looking at recently. Yep. So I've been to Peoria. It was but yeah, I would look at I'm an old millennial who hears to the old school because the boomers aren't up to date facts, or they are, but we'll have to take things from there. Now facts. But shout out to them, man. And I'm kind of in that situation is they're the last one. If you're especially a younger baby boomer, you don't have a pension. So if you got laid off, most people were using their 401ks to live. So most people ain't got enough money to retire on. So that's one reason they clogging up the bottleneck because they can't leave. If you go out on YouTube, because people know I got YouTube channel, there's people like this 50. This lady was 58 talking about I have no retirement and I don't know what to do. It's hundreds and thousands of those videos. So people are trying to figure out how they're gonna retire. Because in the old days you had your pension, and I don't think most people didn't master this 401k investing. So if you don't do it, so now you in a precarious situation. So, and I did that, and which out of ageism, right? So when you try to hire somebody 60-year-olds, right? There's some bias you're gonna get, right? Like you don't want to hire somebody super young. So when you get 60, you're gonna have to you're gonna get it coming in, you're gonna get it going out, right? So what is your value that somebody wants to hire you at 60? Right? Are you training? Are you doing certain federal accounts, or you running projects to help him? Okay, I'm right there with you. Yeah, I'm X. I'll be 58 this year, right? So once again, trying to get set up for retirement. I just feel like I'm gonna work for forever. I'm cool with that. That gives me purpose. And shout out to IT in this industry. It's not like I'm working hard. My pinky sometimes, catching Charlie Harts for hitting that carriage return. Wow, bat, like Kevin Hart, bat, hitting that carriage return. And IT's been great for me. But once again, we're in a new age. I don't think AI is taking everybody's jobs, but I think automation, machine learning, AI together with robotics, it's going to slowly, kind of eat away at that. But people forgot we overhired during COVID, right? So, and two is I went through this when we first did the internet. If you go back and look at the internet move, it's the same wave as the AI, man. So it's the same way as the AI. You comes out, everybody tries to get in, they spend a shitload of money, then only a couple big companies win, and everybody gets washed out, right? So okay, I got you by a decade. I got you by 10. Shout out to it. Now, which I got you by a decade, but now it's let's don't be mistaken. It's hard out here. It's hard out here. I don't want to say word. But no, it's out here. But once again, I think this is a great industry. As my mom used to say, who passed away, she's super religious. This too shall pass. Man, I've been through 3 recessions, right? So the only one this time I'm a little worried about. Usually I was in somebody's government company. I was at DOD or the state of Indiana, somewhere big where I could just kind of ride it out. So we're going to see. So looking kind of shaky for PBO right now. He's going to have to do a pivot or something. So, but once again, that's part of the game. You got to know what you're signing up for. I think IT is going to be around for a while. If you look, there was an article that says 95% of the AI projects were failing. I don't think that's quite true, but it's going to be a tough. It's going to do some things great. And it's going to do some things not so great. So the question is, I think cloud. You got to be in somebody's cloud. Pick one. I'm an AWS guy. I think Azure is actually going to pass AWS. Google's a great cloud. Oracle's making that hit. Salesforce has got a great cloud. Rackspace has a great cloud. So just pick somebody's cloud, get good at it. And really, you want to be a multi-cloud because the big companies are going to have some Azure, the Office 365. Some of the developers are going to be AWS. Some of the developers are going to be Windows. They're going to want to be in Azure. Some of the super technical guys don't like either one of those, and they're going to do BigQuery inside Google, right? So I just would pick a cloud, right? Facts. Yeah. So that's it. Once again, I'm trying to start on get my course finished. I'm not pushing on anybody. A lot of times, I'm gonna go over a lot of things here that we're gonna talk about in the course. I'm getting some labs ready to kind of help people get some hands-on experience when they go out in floors. They could talk about poems. We talked about findings when you specifically can't cut on a stick control. What would be a compensating control for that? Right? SAP, Security Access Program. What does that documentation looks like? System Security Program. That's like 1,100 pages inside AWS. AWS has a piece. You has a piece. What does that look like when you fill it out? What pieces do you need to be aware of that you can communicate to that? Is yours going to pass? Equalizer. The reason why the 2 reasons why I think Azure is going to pass, I think it's 33-25%. The last time I looked. The reason why is what Microsoft does is Microsoft already has an end. If you go into the cloud, you already have running Active Directory on your machine. So you're going to do Active Directory in the cloud, which is AFDS. And you're actually going to do Teams, Outlook, and that whole infrastructure. You can just lift and shift it, save money, just run it straight out the cloud. So I think people are going to gravitate that. The other part of that is AWS has a habit of competing with your big company. Like AWS bought Whole Foods. Kroger spends about $10 million a month on AWS. I'm not giving you $10 million and compete against you against Whole Foods. I'm going to switch over to Azure. People forget, I think Netflix was spending like $30 million a month. You got Amazon Prime, man. You taking my technology and competing against me. I'm not doing that, man. So I think, and they have, people don't realize, Amazon has a lot of vertical companies that they do that with. And they're like, dude, I'm not competing against you. The post office, if I'm government, they got all them Amazon Prime trucks. They talking about they're not going to USPS or United States Post Office. I'm not going to compete against you then and do that, right? So I think between those couple of things, I think that's why they're going to push them. I think the smaller guys that are coming late to the game, they want that Teams and they want that Active Directory FDS, and you get your Enter ID, you get all that stuff built in. It's easier to set up. You don't want to run that stuff on prem, but that's my 2 cents. That's my thoughts on that equalizer. That's my thoughts, and just doing some research on it. I did a video probably 2 or 3 years ago. I mean, they had about 20 companies where they were competing against all these big companies, and they're like, dude, I'm not going to pay you and let you compete against me, right? So once again, people don't realize how vertical AWS is. I think they're going to open up their own shipyard in a couple of years. I did that on a video, but once again, I'm going on a tangent. But that's my thought on that. All facts, they had a 12-year head start. So I think they do. And I love AWS Gov. They have their particular data centers only for government work and government contracts. And they only run certain services that have been government approved. So yeah, the IRS at first said they wanted you in a government data center. And the ones that had that first was AWS. But two is, I think this current administration didn't get along with Jeff Bezos to either. So Jeff Bezos be kind of pissing people off. So a lot of them are just going to switch to Azure. Now, don't get me wrong, AWS is not going anywhere. I think they had a 12-year lead, so they did some miraculous things on AWS. I think their AI strategy is a little weak compared to Azure. If you look at that, but once again, so that's why I think they're going to pass. But to be honest, I think your bigger companies are going to be multi-cloud, especially with stuff like this. If AWS goes down, you want to be able to spin up over Azure, right? If Azure goes down, you want to spin up with inside AWS, right? So I think really you're going to be multi-cloud. So I've been AWS, but probably middle of 2026, I'll probably start getting a few Azure certs. So from a GRC perspective, governance, me doing assessments on it, I'm comfortable in Azure as I am in AWS, right? I got 4 AWS certifications. So I'm, like I said, I'm familiar with the terminology, familiar with the infrastructure and kind of how that rolls. So, but once again, that's my 2 cents. Yeah, I did a video on AWS Gov probably 2 or 3 years ago. Yeah, kind of. Oh, I'll try. The only problem is my SEO. I didn't put my search. I didn't put my search in there very good. I will try Equalizer. I'm struggling with that. Shout out to Chris. We're trying to get AI to read through my videos and help me get my SEO search better on mine. But I will try that. I will try that Equalizer. But so. Of course, now I've been rambling. I got to remember what I said, Equalizer. I'll see what I can do for you, though. I can see what I can do. Let's see. Let's say I hang out for any more questions. But once again, that's just some of my thoughts. Once again, I'm just PBO's thoughts. Until I try to back it up with a few facts. But yeah, I think, and if you look, Azure has been getting better and better. And once again, that's an easy lift. That Teams, AFDS for Active Directory, that's an easy lift for companies to get started. Then you don't have to relearn all of that, right? You got that OU, that whole intra-trust. A lot of people love that, love that kind of technology they understand. And once again, Azure makes it an easy lift and shift to make that happen. So that makes it interesting for that. Was gonna hang out a little longer if I want to answer any questions. PBI always got a couple answers. So, but yeah, once again on the server assessment, people their STIG, CIS, schisms, their CIS level 1, 2. I think they got 3. Then they got some with STIGs and CIS together. I do a machine is at 9 and I listen. I have to think about that. I really don't. I'm more a lab every day guy. That's really what I do. I got a AWS. You go out there, they have labs. So usually I got my free account or I pay a little. So I try to lab on things I talk about. So I really don't read that much, to be honest. Or I'm usually in somebody's Udemy course. I kind of do that? Okay, I'm in their course. And part of any course I've got is going to have labs. So I'm trying to get my Python up for automation inside AWS. So I've been working on my Python skills. But once again, I program forever. So to me, it's just syntax. The part of that is data engineering, AWS glue, step functions. How do you move a petabyte data? How do you get it ready inside AWS Redshift, which is their data warehouse, so you can send it to machine learning so the AI can actually train on certain data, right? I've been trying to look at Medicare data. They got a couple Medicaid synthetic data, which is fake data that you can use to train. So that's kind of what I usually do. I'm usually, shout out to Dewan. I'm usually labbing every day. Once again, I've been enamored with data engineering lately. So that's kind of what I've been learning with architecture as an architect, right? Setting it up VPCs, private links, so it doesn't go on the internet. Which database should you use? RDS, MySQL, Postgres, Oracle, MongoDB, right? NoSQL. That is, there's just so many technologies to save data and move data. What's appropriate for that? Then, from a GRC perspective, how do we lock it down from a STIG perspective, size perspective, or schism perspective? So that when I go on site, I'm comfortable with these technologies and I can have a conversation with the head developer, the CTO. I just give them options of how to become FedRAMP or DoD compliant, right, for their particular technology stack they're using, right? So that's kind of my value add. Once again, I want to thank everybody for joining me. I'll be on Friday at noon. Shout out to Larry doing my lunch and learn. I haven't figured out. Usually I do it the day of. I got to stop doing that. I'm like, well, I'm going to talk about the day. So I just been doing this so long. I have a compliance playlist. It has about 60 hours of different compliance being NIST, STIG, CMC. I did ITAR, which is moving DoD ammunition. Your infrastructure's got to be hard a certain way. So somebody asked me to do an ITAR video. So I've done some unique videos, right? I interviewed for a car manufacturer, and they were doing something called TSACs. That's the European Car Security Hardening Standard. So I did a video on that. So different things I've been doing a video on. So I'm comfortable, or at least know the majority of the compliances. The one thing I need to get better at that I see a lot more, which I'm surprised in the United States, is ISO. I see a ton of ISOs becoming super popular. ISO used to just be a European thing. Once again, I'm a NIST guy because I do federal work. So that's usually what I'm doing. Once again, drop your questions on there. PBO about to go get a little dinner, get back on his AWS studying, labbing today. I got to do What am I doing? I'm doing AWS Glue that's gonna populate a data warehouse with dimensions and fact tables. Then we're gonna do SQL to get it ready for the AI engineer and the data analytics guy, right? So they can run reports on them, then use those reports to train the AI. So I appreciate it, man. I appreciate it. I need to go check my email. I've just been so tired and burnt out. I appreciate it. Just trying to spread my knowledge out inside YouTube. I taught for 10 years at a community college, so I just kind of want to bring that to YouTube. So once again, I'm easily found out in these YouTube streets. Look out for me. I'm gonna be there Friday at noon. We're gonna do a lunch and learn. I'm on Eastern Time in Indiana, right next to my man in Illinois. So I appreciate that. I'm out. I want everybody to have a good night. Reach out to me, and hopefully, when you see my little class, y'all support me. No pressure, no problems. PBO is gonna be on there. If you go check out my videos, last time I looked, I had 821. I think my man Chris Whitlock told me. I haven't even looked. I just do videos. I've been on YouTube about 5 years, so I just be pumping out videos for compliance and cybersecurity and different aspects of things that I'm working on. So once again, in that GRC perspective. So once again, that's what we've been focused on at NIST 800-53 and really that federal work. Shout out to my man doing that DoD work. Hopefully that workstation will help him lock down his sites. Shout out to the security experts. I'm out. Everybody have a good night. I'm out. Appreciate you. Check out the video.